at Root, and in our fanzine, 100% of the money goes straight to the Irish Red Cross Ukraine Crisis Appeal. And Niall and myself, periodically, we just go through our record collection and we write to the people from our favourite bands, including the two guests that are about to hear, that we're going to hear from. And we just ask them, would they write to help raise money for the Red Cross about their favourite gig or about their favourite record. So in the new fanzine, Will Sargent from Echo and the Bunnymen wrote a beautiful piece for us. Members of Frankie Goes to Hollywood. And there's an incredible piece in there by a woman called Marcella Detroit, who was in Shakespeare's Sister. But before that, she was a very successful background vocalist, signing loads of soul records. Great soul. Yeah, loads of blues records. Great song. And she wrote for us in our fanzine about what it was like touring with Eric Clapton and playing in Germany.
I'm there.
And she wrote about playing in a stadium where Hitler had held one of his rallies. And she walked on that stage as a Jewish girl from Detroit, totally terrified and aware of the burden of history. But equally she was aware that I want people to have a great time, and I want people to see that music can change, that you can absolutely bring people together for a positive reason by playing music, by that sense of solidarity, and I feel that that's the spirit that Dave brought, and that's what we're experiencing tonight. So the fanzine is available over there. It's a tenner. Some of our books are available over there as well. They're a tenner to make it easy, so do visit the shop if you can. You know, it's a great night. I'm having a good time. But I'm also slightly disappointed, and I hope it's okay to say that. You know, I was looking at all of you and thinking, no. No one made the effort tonight the way Uncle Carl did. And if any of you have a moment, I would like just to look at Carl's socks.
Socks?
Like, I know times are hard and Dunn's is an easy option, or Deals, or wherever you go for your socks, but you know, Carl made the supreme effort, and I think, okay, and now weirdly I've got Pete Holiday showing me his ankle. But, yeah, next week, if anyone's not busy, we're going to do a sexy socks competition at the end of Dunleary Pier. There'll be two contestants. So well done to everyone who made an effort with the socks. Carl, because you won the socks thing, we'll start with you. You experienced punk, but you're not here in Dublin. You experienced it, you're in Boston at the time.
Well, yeah, I grew up in Boston, spent my teenage years in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and then back to Boston for college. And for me, it was incredibly serendipitous as a music lover, because we moved to Michigan in 1965, which was like peak music central, like it was the music capital of the United States at the time. Michigan, Detroit, and Ann Arbor. And you had Motown at its creative peak, you had all the Detroit rock and roll bands, you had blues and rhythm and blues. And the music was literally in the air. You had Bob Seger and Iggy Pop went to the high school across town from R1. We saw the MC5. I was 14. I saw them do free, like the city ran free concerts, and I saw them in a park there. You can see YouTube clips of them, and they scared the shit out of us. They were so amazing. And then back to college, back to Boston in the early 70s to 77. And we were there for the start of punk rock in New York and Boston. And so we saw Talking Heads when they were still a three-piece band, Blondie when they were still a rock and roll band. We used to so we lived in the Rat, which was Boston's equivalent of CBGB's. And we were there 4 or 5 nights a week. We saw the very first American gig that Down did, which was awful, and they ate pizza on stage, and the audience favoured them with beer bottles at the time, yeah. But it was just an incredibly exciting time. We myself and 2 friends had a band that we never did a gig, but we had a band and rehearsed in the equivalent of the garden shed that Robert was talking about. And we would stand at the back of the club along the back wall, posing away and looking cool. And a big, tall, skinny guy with shades stood beside us, and we were posing as well. And we were probably standing beside each other for 3 weeks at gigs before we finally spoke. He asked us if we had a band, and we said we did. And we didn't have a drummer, and so we weren't doing gigs yet. And he said he had a band, but he was only doing the suburbs until they were good enough to come in and play the Ramp. And about 2 weeks later, I went on my own to a gig in the Orpheum Theatre. Rick Derringer was coming up from New Jersey, and he flew up, but his support band got stuck in the snow in the winter. So they had a local band on, and lo and behold, who walks on stage? But your man was standing beside us, and it was the Cars. It was Rick Otis. So it was that kind of a scene. Like it was, everything was happening, and it was incredibly exciting. The Ramones did their very first gig outside New York City in Boston, and we were at that. And that was one of those life transforming gigs, because they had a technology none of us had ever seen before, which was an electric guitar tuner. Now it was like this big, and it looked like an oscilloscope from a submarine or something. And they're roadie tuning their guitars while the support band was on, noodling away. And they just walked out on stage, said, "Hi, we're the Ramones. 1, 2, 3, 4." And 25 minutes and 20 songs later, they just said bye and walked off. And then they did, and the way it worked was a Boston band and a New York band would play together. They would each do 2 sets a night. And then the Boston band would go to New York and they do the same in reverse. And so if a band did, like I say, if the New York band came and did 2 or 3 nights in Boston, they would have done 6 gigs, and they would leave behind a load of committed fans. We'd all be hooked on them. And so when the Ramones did their second set, somebody heckled them and yelled, "Ramones, go home." And they just said, "No, 1, 2, 3, 4. And literally, we were like, I don't know if you remember the old ad for Sony Hi-Fi, where there's a guy in a chair and he's just pushed the pin back. That's what we were like. That's what we were like, having watched the Ramones. And so it was incredibly exciting. And I wound up in Dublin by accident. I had been in Ireland in '74, met a girl, stayed a little while, and I was coming back to visit her. And I had all my friends in bands in Boston had given me records to drop into Enemy and Melody Maker and Sounds. And I just said, if there's anything in Dublin, I'll find it. And Hot Press was brand new. I think they were on issue 2 or something. So I called into the office with these records for review, and I met Bill Graham. And Bill and I started talking. We spent like 2 hours talking about music.
And Bill Graham, the legend.
Yeah. And then Bill introduced me to Dave Kavanagh, who was putting on a Mink DeVille gig in the stadium. And I knew Willie DeVille, and we'd seen him loads of times. So they said, "Why don't you write about them?" So I did, and Hot Press printed it. And I said, "Whoa, this is cool." So I kept sending them articles, and they kept printing them. And then I found out you could get paid for them. and then Niall Stokes, I was about to go home to America, and Niall said, "Are you doing anything?" And I said, "No, just hanging around."
It's down here tonight.
No,
You didn't make it, no?
Anyway, he offered me a 3-month-long job that lasted 3 years, and I've been here ever since. But the amazing thing, I guess that's a very long-winded way of saying that, having seen Detroit rock and roll at its peak, punk in Boston and New York, Dublin was every bit as exciting, 77 to 80, as any of those places. It really was, and it had there was a unique edge to it. Because, as Ian and Ross talked about, no bands, or very few bands, would come to Ireland in the 70s. And if they did come, and the rare band that did come, it was either their very first gig at the start of a tour to bed the band down, or it was stuck at the end and they were tired and they didn't want to be there. But what it meant was that music fans in Dublin went to every single gig. So you could be at a Pink Floyd gig in the stadium, you could be at a Suzi Quatro gig the following week or a month later, and it would be all the same people. And so therefore the influences on musicians were much more varied than you would have found in New York or London, because they were much more cliquey. And so it made the Dublin bands, I think, much more interesting. And I think if you only need to listen to the Radiators to understand that they're pulling from so many sources.
Okay, that's fascinating to me because you're an outsider, you've got a different perspective, you've been blooded, Ann Arbor, Boston, New York, you've seen punk. But then you come here and you see that open-mindedness, the bands, the young 18-year-olds who were listening, Ian mentioned Planksty and that whole wave of, leading up to Moving Hearts, of these. Faulkner Kelly once said to me that was Ireland's punk moment. It was kind of 72, 73, where the trad bands went electric.
Oh no, I disagree, because I got dragged up to the Meeting House one time to watch a folk gig, and it was the most po-faced bullshit I'd ever sat through. Seriously, it was like each act would say, well, here's a song I learned from a really old lady living on a mountain. And then it was, here's a song I learned from an even older man living on an even taller mountain. And then if anybody enjoyed themselves, they would be literally told, shut up, don't clap, don't enjoy the gig. We're all very serious musicians here. And it was crap. And I just said, I am never going back to that place again.
Fantastic.
And so it to me, it was the arrival of all of these guys.
Okay.
Kind of explode that, and it was like somebody had knocked a valve off a pressure cooker and everything came out all at once. Yeah.
Okay, and that's another good point. And in terms of Ross, for example, a lot of the people you'll hear from the scene, they weren't just fans or they weren't just in bands. They started putting on gigs. They started writing. They started doing graphic design. And in your case, where did the graphic design? Did you do the Blades?
Yeah, I did the Blades.
Did you do
logo.
Freebird?
I did the Freebird logo, the Rhythm Kings album sleeves, which is, with Dave in the Mollies, I did most of their record sleeves. I learned basically I learned the graphic design on the job in Hot Press, because Hot Press was so small and poor that everybody had 2 jobs at least. And mine were writing and proofreading, which was so boring. So I thought that the 2 lads who were doing the layouts looked like they were having more fun. So I kind of wheedled my way in there and picked it up that way. And then I was friends with Steve Averill, who of course is a world-class graphic designer. So I learned a lot from just watching and stealing. But it was that exciting time because everything was punky, everything was do it yourself, everything was, pilfer from all sources, and you can use this and you can use that, and you can bend this and you can stick a funny face on top of that figure, and it was all connected and all a byproduct of that, I think. Yeah.
Fantastic. Phil, you're from Dublin. You grew up in Dublin.
Crumlin.
Yeah, good man.
Before punk. So where did music come into? Like, were you from a musical family? Were you going to see gigs before punk?
My dad, God rest his soul, my dad was, I remember being in Galtimore Road at my auntie Maggie's, and my dad sang Pool of Vogue, if not, and he sang Pool of Vogue, and he had this brilliant tenor voice, and I sat there and I went, oh my God, wow, and it suddenly made me realise that my dad was a brilliant singer, and it came out of nowhere, and then I bought a guitar. My dad bought me a guitar. My mum and dad bought me a guitar. I couldn't play it. I still can't play guitar, as people say. We just started writing. I just didn't think I'd be a writer, but then I had these words in my head, and I just started writing shit down. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's what happened. So. And I'm a very lucky person because I'm still in the music business, so I'm very lucky.
Yeah, so you get the guitar, you're surrounded by music, and you're writing lyrics. How do you get to be in a band? Like, what was the scene like for
Johnny Sullivan, who I spoke to when Johnny Sullivan was a drummer of Revolver, and he used to live in Tala, and he knows all these guys, you know, Kevin Ellie and the original members of Revolver, and the late great Billy Morley. Billy Morley was my hero. Billy Morley, for anyone who doesn't know, he was like a superhero, you know who I'm talking about. He was just like...
Billy was the guitarist in Revolver.
And
then played with the Rats.
joined the Radiators. And Billy Morley was like, honestly, if you see Billy Morley, he was like the rock star.
He was Ireland's Mick Ronson.
Seriously, he was so good looking. He had everything, Billy. You know, and I managed to share a stage with him, so I'm very, very lucky. You know, so. But Billy, when we wrote songs, and I remember sitting with them, and we wrote a song about condoms, and me and Billy were sitting, and his wife Rita, and she was giving us cups of tea and everything. But we wrote a song called Louie Louie about condoms. So it was like, you flushed all your love down the Louie Louie. Contraception guaranteed, it floats out to the sea. Me and Billy wrote that song, you know, so it's like just crazy stuff, you know. So, but Billy Morley was a genius, and that's where it all kind of came from. Billy inspired me. I didn't know I wanted to be a lead singer, but all of a sudden I grew into it, you know. So listen, here we are now, you know. So I'm not a show off at all, you know. So
very shy and quiet. So Revolver was literally your first band.
No, I was in a band called Chevrolet. That was like a real stupid covers band, and I didn't know what was going on with it. And then Kevin Helly and Johnny Sullivan, you know all about this, you know, said we need a singer, and then I'm like, I can't sing, you know. So, but so Kevin Helly and Billy Morley and Johnny Sullivan and me formed Revolver. So. And we did pretty damn good, by the way, you know.
Yeah, and you got gigs very, very early on. Like, how did you get those gigs, or was it
really difficult? Smiley Bodger was a great help. We got gigs in Morons, people now again, you know. So, but it was really, really hard. Revolver got us a residency in the spinning wheel. So it's a spinning wheel was like, you know, and we ended up in the Sunday World, and there was somebody cut their hand at the gig. Somebody cut their hand, and there was like, you know, it was in the front page of the Sunday World, and everyone was going, oh my God, these punks are all over the place. They're terrible, you know. And my mommy said. And she said, Philip, you're on the front page of the Sunday World. What's going on? You know, so it's like, oh, it's all right, Mommy. It's all right, you know. So, but it was like.
Does anyone remember that? Like the Sunday World, that
horrible paper.
Yeah,
horrible paper.
But the Sunday World sensation, as the Radiators put it, and there was a young fella called Anto who used to wear a white boiler suit and went to gigs, and he was at the Revolver gig, and it was messing, and his hand got cut, and the Sunday World took the photo, and it was members of the Dublin
front page.
Yeah, front page. Members of the Dublin punk cult cover themselves in blood.
Honestly,
in a ritual.
So think of the news in the world now. It was like the biggest thing in the fucking Ireland. It was like I was on the front page, and my mum was going, Philip, what you thinking? And Sean said, Philip with the full word, you know. It's all right, Mommy, you know. So, you know what you want to, you always want to please your mommy, you know. So, she was going crazy.
The Sunday World had another front page, which the headline I can still remember was Punk Rock Band Shock on Event. and a band was playing a school dance or something, and they offered a bottle of Blue Nun to the head nun. A beautiful piece of symmetry.
In Donegal.
That was front page news.
Yeah. We used to rehearse in the convent at St. Bernadette's Church in Crumlin. St. Bernadette's, you know, in St. Bernadette's Church, we rehearsed with revolver in the back of it, you know, and the nuns were really nice. They were really cool, by the way, you know. So they really loved it, you know. So anyway.
Well, they were afraid of the cult, you know, they're afraid that they'd cut their hands off. But, you know, to me, Revolver weren't punk in the sense of the Clash. So many of the bands, and I include the Vipers, were more inspired by the mod look, by the jam, by that brilliant power pop idea. Karl, were you seeing that in Dublin, you know, when you were going to see these really great bands?
Yeah, in fact, as my memory is that there weren't any really hardcore punk bands in Dublin at the time. They actually came later.
we certainly weren't a hardcore punk band.
And I think
because when Pete, when Pete and Damon and I, we all got together, we were writing songs, and Private World is like a really brilliant song, but it's not a punk song, you know. So
it's much more new wave, I think.
Yeah,
from if you want to stick a label on, probably much more new wave. But I think almost all of the bands were like that. You know, if you looked at the Fabrics and the Sinners and a lot of the other bands that were knocking around, and especially the Vipers, Revolver, and the Rads were already gone at that point. But the hardcore stuff really did come later. Like I think probably maybe post 1980 or 82, but it focused around Advanced Records on King Street. But they were definitely later, and therefore were to us oddballs, you know. But again, I think it circles back to what I said about the Dublin musicians having so many varied influences that the music they were making was.
I remember writing a song called Bomb Scare Thoroughfare, which is about the troubles in the north. And it was a song called Bomb Scare Thoroughfare, and I remember writing the lyrics for it. And take a walk down Bomb Scare Thoroughfare, see all the people that walk down there, and it was like, it was a peace song. It was trying to make peace, but it was like, take a walk down Bomb Scare Thoroughfare, because you were gonna go walking down, you could get blown up in any second, you know. So, but I mean, I've got to say, I'm very proud of those lyrics, you know. So, Bomb Scare Thoroughfare, so it's a great lyric, you know. So, in my opinion, so.
It is, man.
Yeah, and you know, that's the really interesting thing about punk. Karl, you mentioned that it's not until, you know, Paranoid Visions and Napalm Sunday, like really hardcore punk, DIY punk bands, that classic punk look comes in Irish history. But there's a load of glam rock influence. And you know, I can't be in a room.
Oh yeah.
I can't be in a room with Pete Holiday without mentioning, you know, that glam rock, and you mentioned, you know, Bowie and his band, and that filtered through into Irish music, to T-Rex, absolutely, but also Sweet and Slade and Bolan. But if any of you get a chance, the new Pete Holiday stuff is
Absolutely incredible.
Probably the best thing he's ever done.
But you know, I'd say that, Pete, I'd say that it is pretty, the recent stuff is pretty damn good as well. The recent stuff is pretty damn good. So Aidan and myself, and Danton Supple, who is Coldplay's producer, he's very much involved in the reasons. He's, as I say, Danton Supple, huge name, and so we're going to get all this sorted out next in the next 6 months with Pete, and so we're going to get this released in the next year or so. So honestly, we've got some. You never stop writing. You never stop. You know that, Pete. You know, so you never stop writing. You just keep going. you just keep going. Why should I stop writing songs? Why should I? No way I should stop writing. I'm going to keep going. So,
No, and that's a very good point.
It's a passion.
It's a very good point, and isn't it funny that we're at this stage in our lives, and that we can now say Sunday night is all right for fighting. I get the feeling it's going to start kicking off. Can I just really thank Robert for making this.
Can I just say some things about Dave from me? So, me and Dave were the greatest friends since we met in Moran's, and when Billy Moloney was thrown up backstage when Robert was about to go on stage. Billy Moloney was thrown up.
Stage fright.
Yeah, he was getting sick. Billy Moloney got sick every time we were going on stage. So Dave came out and said, "Oh, okay. What's happening there?" So it's like, so. And then Dave and I became the greatest of friends. And Dave was working in Murray's Rent-A-Car down in Baggot Street Bridge. I was working in Birchall's Advertising at that time. And we were both in bands, and we just didn't know what was going on. We didn't know our lives, so. And then I moved to O'Keefe's Advertising, and we used to go to, the first thing that happened was we went to Toners. When we started going to Toners, it all changed. Because music came in, so it's like, Dave Moloney was one of the greatest persons I have ever known in my life.
One Dave story that he told me, that when the Vipers first went across to London, Paul, of course, many of you I'm sure know this, Paul's older brother Billy Boyle was a very successful stage actor and a bit of television. And when they went over, Paul stayed in Billy's posh apartment, but the rest of the lads slept on park benches in Hyde Park. So that's what they were doing at the time. Literally, they were sleeping on park benches while Paul was enjoying the luxury of his brother's apartment. So that's, that's kind of what it was like for bands. It wasn't all glamour.
No, and these people worked. So thank you to all of the speakers tonight. I can say personally, you changed my life. I think you changed Ireland's culture. It was an honour to be asked by Robert and his family to be part of this celebration. Also want to thank Whelan's, who've been incredibly decent and just easy to work with. So thank you to everyone for being here.
Oh, yeah.
Socks out for the lads.